All right, so you ready for this? This deep dive. We're taking on a story today that I think a lot of you have probably heard of before.
Yeah, this one's it's tough, but it's also a story about hope.
Right. It's I guess that's what makes it so important to talk about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to Delhi back in 2012, and we're going to talk about the story of Jyoti Singh Pandey.
A young woman whose story really I think changed India.
Yeah. Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've got some excerpts from this text called The Brave Heart of Jyoti.
And through this we can really kind of dive into not just what happened, but like what happened after and what it meant for India as a country.
All right, so let's set the scene a little bit. It's December 16th, 2012, just a normal winter evening in Delhi. Jyoti, she's a 23-year-old physiotherapy student. She's out with her friend, Awindra. They've just seen a movie.
Just a normal night. Right, just a normal night out.
Yeah, exactly. And they're heading home, and they hop on what they think is a public bus.
Public transportation, something they've done a million times, you know.
Yeah.
But this time, it's different.
Yeah, and that's where things really take a turn, right?
Yeah. So the bus turns out to be private, and they're already like there's the driver and five other men on board. And the text actually like describes how the whole atmosphere kind of changes on that bus. It gets really, really menacing.
And they know. The
Yeah.
text makes it very clear that both Jyoti and Awindra realize very quickly that they're in danger.
Yeah. There's a section that talks about how the men start making all these like lewd comments and the bus starts going in the wrong direction,
Oh, wow.
like off its route. And yeah, so they realize that something is really, really wrong. And this is where Jyoti's incredible courage really comes out, you
Yeah.
know? Like the source, it describes her as brave and fearless. Like even though she's outnumbered, she fights back against these attackers.
It's hard to even imagine. Like, what do you think it was that gave her that courage?
I mean, you just have to admire her strength in a situation like that, right? It seems like she absolutely refused to be a victim. And it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, yeah. But unfortunately, her fighting back, it escalated the violence.
Yeah, and both of them, both Jyoti and her friend, they suffer these terrible, brutal assaults. And Jyoti's injuries, they're really severe, especially internally. I mean, it's difficult to read about.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, it's important that we understand the magnitude of what happened here.
Absolutely.
So Windra, thankfully, he manages to escape and get help, and Jyothi's rushed to the hospital. But like you said, her injuries, they're extremely serious.
Right. And this is really where the story goes beyond, just what happened to Jyoti. This is where it starts to affect the whole nation.
Because this wasn't just an isolated incident.
No. News of this attack, it just spreads. I mean, it's like wildfire. And it ignites this huge wave of outrage and anger all across India.
I mean, and understandably so, right? Yeah, it just becomes this huge symbol of this deep problem that India was dealing with, this problem of violence against women.
Right. And not just the violence, but like you were saying before, just how deep rooted the problem is and the need for change that was so clearly needed.
Yeah, and it really resonated with people, didn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the source, it talks about how massive protests just erupted across the entire country, people demanding justice for Jyoti and demanding that, that India become a safer place for women.
It seems like this event, it was kind of like this, it was like a pressure valve that got released.
Yeah.
Like all these fears and frustrations that people had, especially women, it all just came pouring out.
It definitely seemed like it.
Sadly, though, Jyoti, despite all the medical attention and even being flown to Singapore for treatment, she didn't survive.
Yeah, she died on December 29th.
Right. It's just devastating. But even after she passed, Jyoti's story kept pushing people to fight for change. I mean, one of the most remarkable things to me is how the protests and the outrage, it actually made a difference, a real difference.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Indian government, they actually responded.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 2013, they passed this law called the Criminal Law Amendment Act,
Wow.
which was a direct result of everything that happened.
So it was more than just, thoughts and prayers.
Oh, absolutely. It led to some real concrete changes. They expanded the legal definition of rape, made the punishments for this kind of crime way harsher, and they even set up these fast-track courts specifically to speed up these cases.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Did the source mention any other big changes? I mean, like, were there other issues that Jyoti's case brought to light?
Yeah, actually, it brought up the fact that, violence against women, it's not always just, assault.
Well-
So they created new offenses, like specifically for acid attacks and stalking.
Right.
Because those were things that really weren't properly addressed before.
Well,
And there was also a big push for reforming the police and just how they handle these cases, making them more sensitive,
yeah,
like
yeah,
more understanding of what victims go through.
yeah,
So it was a pretty big step forward. I mean, at least on paper, right?
yeah, yeah. And it shows that even in the face of something so horrible, positive change can happen.
Right.
What about the men who attacked Yodi? What happened to them?
Right. Well, the 4 adults involved, they were sentenced to death.
Wow.
Yeah. And the one who was legally a juvenile at the time, he got 3 years in a reform facility.
Okay.
The bus driver, he died in prison before the trial even ended.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. But Jody's story, I mean, it doesn't really end there, right?
No, not at all, because Jyoti's parents, Badri and Asha, they become these really powerful voices in India. Oh yeah. They've been fighting for justice and for women's rights ever since. They turned their grief, the worst thing that could happen to a parent, they turned it into this force for change.
That's amazing. Just incredible courage. And I guess it's a reminder that even after something this awful, there's always hope.
It is. Jyoti's story, it's a story that's specific to India, of course, but it makes you think, doesn't it,
Yeah.
about our responsibility to fight for a safer world. And I think that's the question we all need to be asking ourselves. What can we learn from this, and how can we apply it to our own lives?
Yeah. Because, are there similar issues? Maybe not as extreme, but similar issues in our communities. There are things that we see that we need to speak up about.
Exactly. And it can be hard, right? But that's kind of the whole point.
Right.
Standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, this was definitely a heavy one, but I think it was a really important deep dive, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to everyone for listening.
And remember, Jody's legacy, it's all about showing us that positive change is possible.
Even when things seem incredibly dark. There's always hope, and there's always a way to make things better.
Right. So, yeah, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.